Alright, so you're in the shop, you're making stuff, you're trying to get a business going. But there's this thing that's always nipping at your heels, this invisible force that's just eating away at your time and your money. I call it the profit killer. It's not the cost of wood, it's not the electricity bill. It's all that time you spend measuring, marking, checking, rechecking, setting up a stop block for one cut, then tearing it down for the next. Every time you pick up a tape measure and a pencil for a repetitive task, you're losing money. It's death by 1,000 tiny setups, and it's killing your workflow and your bottom line. So what's the answer? It's not buying $1 million CNC, it's right there in your scrap bin. I call it the scrap solution. It's about building simple, functional jigs that do one thing perfectly, over and over again. These things don't have to be pretty. Forget the dovetails and the fancy finishes. We're talking plywood, hot glue, screws, whatever you got lying around. The goal here isn't to make a beautiful tool, it's to make a tool that gets you to the finish line faster, with more accuracy. We're prioritizing speed and precision over aesthetics, because that's what makes you money. These aren't just shop helpers, they're production machines in disguise, built from the stuff you were going to throw out anyway. They take the thinking out of the process, letting you work from muscle memory and mechanical stops. The setup time vanishes because the jig the setup. So stick with me. Here are 5 rapid jig designs using 2026 standard workshop scrap. You know, the plywood and 2x4 cutoffs we all have, to slash your production time in half. Let's get to it. First up, the zero clearance fence extension. Look, we've all been there. You're trying to rip a bunch of thin strips, or maybe you're making a bunch of identical cabinet parts on the table saw. Every time, you're nudging the fence, tapping it, measuring from the blade, measuring from the other side, hoping it's parallel. Then you make a test cut, it's off by a hair, and you start the whole dance over again. That's friction. Not physical friction, but mental friction. It slows you down and introduces a chance for error with every single adjustment. It's a waste of focus that you could be putting into the actual work. This jig kills that. It's basically just a straight piece of plywood or MDF that you clamp right to your existing table saw fence. The first thing you do is run it through the blade, creating a perfect zero clearance edge that shows you exactly where the cut will be every single time. No more guessing, no more squinting to see the side of the tooth. The edge of the jig, the cut line. This simple act alone is a game changer. It gives you a solid, reliable reference point that's always there, always accurate. Now, the real magic happens when you start adding to it. You can embed a measuring tape right into the top of it for quick reference. You can cut notches and slots into it to act as repeatable stops for specific project dimensions you use all the time. Imagine, you need to cut parts that are 3 inches, 6 inches, and 12 inches wide for a big order. You cut those notches once, and now you can just slide your fence, lock it into the notch, and you know it's perfect. No measuring, no double checking. You've turned your table saw into a precision cutting station, making rip and cross cuts frictionless and repeatable, all with a piece of scrap. Alright, let's move over to the miter saw. This is where repetition can either make you or break you. If you're cutting dozens of frame parts, legs, or stretchers, you need every single one to be identical. The traditional way, you set up a stop block. You clamp a piece of wood to your fence, make a test cut, measure it, tap the block, measure again. You know the drill. It's slow. And what happens when you need to switch to a different length? You have to tear it all down and start the process from scratch. That cognitive load, that constant worry of did I check that measurement, drains your energy. This is where the drop-in stop block system comes in. It's so simple it's almost dumb, but it is brutally effective. You start by attaching a long auxiliary fence to your miter saw station, just a straight piece of plywood or a 2x4. Then you cut a series of uniform slots or dados along the top edge of this fence. These slots are your anchor points. Now, you make your stop blocks. These are just little L-shaped pieces of scrap with a key on the bottom that fits perfectly into those slots you just cut. No slop. Now for the setup, you need to cut a bunch of pieces at 18 inches. You measure once, from the blade to the 18-inch mark on your fence. You drop your L-shaped stop block into the nearest slot, slide it over so it's perfectly at 18 inches, and you clamp it down. That's it. You're set. You can now make 100 cuts and they will all be identical. Need to switch to a 24-inch cut for the next part of the project. Unclamp the block, drop it in a new slot further down. Measure once, clamp, and go. You're not reinventing the wheel every time. You're just moving a pre-made piece to a new position. It removes the need to think, to measure, to second guess. It's pure speed. Joinery. This is where projects can really grind to a halt. Whether you're using dowels or biscuits, the traditional process is, honestly, pretty tedious. You have to lay out your matching parts, carefully measure and mark the center lines on both pieces, align your tool to those little pencil marks, and just hope everything lines up when you bring them together. It's a visual game and, your eyes can play tricks on you. One slight misalignment, one pencil mark that's a little too thick, and your joint is off. It's a huge time sink, especially when you've got dozens of joints to make. But the self-centering dowel or biscuit guide completely changes the game. It shifts the process from visual alignment to tactile alignment. You actually do it by feel. The jig is basically a block of wood or plywood with a slot in the center that's the exact thickness of the material you're working with. So if you're using 3/4 inch plywood, you build a jig with a 3/4 inch slot. Inside this jig, you mount your guide for your doweling jig or a reference fence for your biscuit joiner, perfectly centered. Here's how it works. You just slide the jig over the edge of your board. Because the slot is the exact thickness of your material, the jig automatically centers itself. You don't have to look, you can feel it. It just slips on and stops. Now, your dowel guide or biscuit slot is guaranteed to be in the dead center of the board's edge. You just plunge your tool, and you're done. Move to the next spot, slide the jig on, plunge, and repeat. No layout lines, no measuring, no visual alignment. You're just working by touch, moving down the line with speed and perfect accuracy. It makes joinery almost an afterthought. Pocket holes are all about speed, but even they have a bottleneck. If you're building face frames or cabinets, you're drilling dozens, maybe even hundreds of these things. The standard process is pick up a workpiece, clamp it in the pocket hole jig, drill, unclamp, set the piece down, pick up the next one. And honestly, that whole sequence of motions repeated over and over really adds up. You spend more time handling the material and clamping than you do actually drilling the holes. It's an inefficient dance that just wears you out. So, we build a dedicated station for it. This isn't complicated. It's just a long runner, a scrap 2x4 or a strip of plywood that you can clamp to your workbench. On top of this runner, you mount your pocket hole jig. Now, here's the key. You add toggle clamps. You position these toggle clamps along the runner on either side of your jig. These clamps are the heart of the system, one flick of the wrist, and they apply hundreds of pounds of pressure, locking your workpiece in place instantly. Another flick, and it's released. This setup transforms your workflow from single-piece processing to batch processing. You lay out all your identical components, say, all the styles for 10 cabinet doors, right there on your bench. You set one up in the station, the clamps are engaged, you drill your 2 holes, it's released, you slide it out and slide the next one in. You're not picking up a clamp, you're not fumbling with screws. Your hands stay in the work zone. You get into a rhythm slide, clamp, drill, release, slide, clamp, drill, release. You can process an entire stack of components without ever picking up a pencil or a traditional clamp. It's an assembly line for one. Getting things square. It's the foundation of everything we build, but how often are you fighting with it? You're trying to hold 2 pieces together at a perfect 90-degree angle, hold a clamp, and drive a screw, all at the same time. You need 3 hands. You use a speed square, but it slips. You clamp it, but the clamp pulls the joint out of square. You're constantly checking and rechecking, fighting against the parts. This manual squaring process is not only slow, but it's where frustrating mistakes are born, forcing you to backtrack and fix things. Let's replace that manual uncertainty with mechanical certainty. The modular L-based squaring jig does just that. At its core, it's just 2 pieces of thick, stable plywood. MDF works great too, joined together to form a perfect, rigid 90-degree corner. This is your new reference. You build this L shape on a larger base, which gives you a platform to work on. The key is to make it modular. You drill a grid of holes, or cut a series of slots into the base, creating integrated clamping zones. Now, instead of holding the parts, the jig holds them for you. You press your 2 workpieces into that perfect 90-degree corner. The jig forces them into alignment. Then, you use the clamping zones on the base to lock them down. You can use F-clamps, toggle clamps, or even simple bench dogs and wedges. Once they're locked, they are not moving. The joint is held perfectly square, hands-free. Now you can focus on what you're supposed to be doing, fastening the joint. You can drill, screw, or nail with both hands, knowing that the geometry is guaranteed. It's a 3rd hand, a 4th hand. It's the whole crew, right there in one simple jig. So, let's just think about that for a second. We didn't spend any money, we used scraps, but the time we saved? The zero-clearance fence probably shaves a minute off every unique setup. The miter saw system saves 30 seconds per cut on a big run. The centering jig, that's at least a minute saved per joint by eliminating layout. The pocket hole station easily cuts your drilling time by 60 to 70%. And the squaring jig, that might save you 5 minutes of pure frustration per corner. Add it all up over a day, over a week, over a big project. You're not saving minutes, you're saving hours. That's an entire extra cabinet built, another cutting board glued up, another order out the door. Now once you build these things, don't just toss them in a corner. That defeats the whole purpose. The final step is to make them part of your shop system. Take a marker and write on them what they're for. 18-inch miter stop, 3/4-inch dowel center, cabinet assembly L-base. Be specific. Then, give them a home, drill a hole in them and hang them on the wall right next to the tool they belong to. The miter saw stops go by the miter saw. The fence extension hangs on the table saw. When you need it, you don't hunt for it, you grab it, it's ready, and you're working in seconds. This instant readiness is what makes the system truly powerful. This is about more than just being faster. It's about changing the value of your time. Every hour you save is an hour you get back. What will you do with it? You can finally focus on that complex design you've been putting off. You can experiment with new techniques, or you can straight up take on more work and increase your income. The choice is yours. You've just upgraded your shop's efficiency without spending a dime. Reinvest your saved time into high-value design, or ramp up your order volume. Your shop's new hourly rate starts now.